So it's been quite a week in terms of policy and government involvement, really, in family law and family courts. So I just wanted to cover it. I meant to cover the latest research last week, but never got around to it. So I'm going to bundle them both in together. So the two main talking points that I want to just take a brief look at. I don't want to get too het up about it, so I'm just going to try and cover this as factually as possible. So the first report is the Everyday Report, which basically says that 87% of cases involve domestic abuse, and the other one is the government's plan to remove the presumption of contact. So, I mean, family court is a mess. These sorts of cases are complicated and truth is twisted, false allegations can be made, and professionals lack the training, the insight, the personal boundaries and self-awareness to handle these cases. We see it all the time. I work with it all the time. I'm not these types of reports, I'm talking about the Everyday Report, they can highlight some of those things, absolutely. And same with the harm report. There were lots of things in the harm report that were true. The problem was they're true for everyone, not just the select few. Courts are re-traumatising. Victims are treated badly. And by victims, I mean mums, dads, children. You know, this is kind of where my work, it feels difficult because I work with lots of women who've experienced domestic abuse as narcissistic abuse. But I've also worked with so many men that have experienced it as well. And I want to be balanced, and I want to acknowledge both of those sides without taking sides. I am gender neutral. I focus on behaviour and actually child protection. That's my background and that's my passion. And so when I critique these reports, that is where I'm coming from, is that I'm trying to see all victims rather than just one particular gender. And that doesn't mean that I'm ignoring that gender. I acknowledge a lot of what is said, and as I did with the harm report, there's a lot in that I disagree with, and the gender element is the main element that I disagree with. But their findings are gender neutral. Fathers experience the exact same things in the harm report, and the same with this report. The things that they're saying, fathers experience them as well. So if you're a mum listening to this, I'm not trying to trigger you, and I'm not saying that your experience of domestic abuse, I am saying that your experience of domestic abuse is important, and that the system is wrong. It doesn't handle these cases right. If you're a father listening to this, I acknowledge the exact same thing. My point is, this is not about gender, and this is why these reports I find really difficult, is because my day-to-day work and the people that I hear from, and my business is built on working with men and women. I have a counselling service. We work with men and women. My day-to-day work, working with clients, I work with men and women, so I see both. I see all of it, and so I find it difficult when it feels like it's coming from one side. So let's have a quick look. So let's have a look at what the study did. So it looked at 298 closed case files and watched 95 hearings. Now, I've looked at the methodology on that, and it's sound. It was randomly selected across, I think it was 3 areas, magistrates and judges. So they did a pretty good job of keeping that fairly random, and there were closed cases so they could see the whole thing. But where the misleading element is that they've said 87% of cases involve domestic abuse, or is present. Domestic abuse is present. They haven't differentiated between whether that's like a false allegation of domestic abuse or whether it's backed up by the evidence. And again, I'm not saying this to those of you that have experienced domestic abuse and feel as though your situation hasn't been taken seriously. That happens. I know that 100%. What I'm trying to say is we have, if you're making claims, and this works within family court, if you're making claims, it's got to be credible and it's got to be factual. This is opening itself up to question because it's misleading. In saying domestic abuse is present, it is saying that it exists, and it hasn't got that. It doesn't actually. If you read the report, that's not true. It's not saying that that's true. What it's saying is that mentions of domestic abuse is present in 87% of cases. And like I say, so for what you can take for family court, this is really important. If you're going to make claims, make them accurate. If you mislead, it undermines your credibility. And this is my problem with these reports, is it's spun. And I'm not saying that these cases, I want to be really clear here. Courts do not handle these cases well at all. They mess it up. They mess it up for children. You have my full agreement on that. I'm just saying that the way it's been represented, it allows for scrutiny and allows it to be pulled apart. And that's a shame, because if this was delivered as being gender neutral, and actually the statistics now show that it is closer, there is more gender parity in domestic abuse cases. If rather than focusing on gender, we focused on the children or the behaviour, then these reports would be so valuable. But unfortunately, because they make it about gender, because of their qualitative data, their quantitative data I'm fine with. I don't like the way it's been presented because it's misleading, but I'm fine with the methodology of that, 100%. The qualitative data, where they did interviews, there was 38 mothers, one grandmother, and only one father was interviewed. There was no LGBTQ involvement. They missed out huge chunks of the domestic abuse picture. And that is what undermines these reports, is if you're going to do these things and you're going to use them to influence policy, then you've got to present it in the right way. You've got to include all victims. And I'm not saying that to diminish anyone's. I hope that you understand. Anyway, I think I've been clear on where I stand with that. If you're offended, I apologise that that's how you've taken it. But I think I've said it enough times that that's not what I'm saying here. I just feel that reports should be balanced. There can be a really good message, and there is a really good message that these cases are handled really poorly. That is 100% true, and I'm 100% behind that. I also am behind the fact that 80% of cases mention domestic abuse. But I think we need clarity on what that means. And also, I think that we need to involve more of the victims of that. And that includes fathers, children, even perpetrators, and more professionals who can provide a full picture of harm, not just a selected part of it. And that's the biggest concern for me in this, is not the message per se. Family court is problematic, doesn't handle these right, full agreement. It's how they're positioning it and the misleading title, because it's not. It involves mentions. It doesn't mean it's present. Allegations are present. There's nothing that tells us that whether of those cases, of those 87 cases, how many there was. In fact, I think there was very few that went to fact finding. I think none of them actually went to fact finding, if I remember rightly. I'm just doing a quick scroll to see if I can see what it said. Yeah, very few of them went to fact find. So that tells us that we don't know whether they were proven. And again, I'm not saying fact find is 100% perfect either, but what I'm saying is that it's misleading in the way it's represented. So that's my review on that. Now, the knock-on effect of that, of course, is they've taken this report to say that the presumption of contact should be stopped. And that's where I find I'm really uncomfortable with that, because there are systems which, again, they're not perfect, but there are systems to assess for risk on contact. And removing the presumption of contact, i.e. both parents have a right to be involved. It goes against the Human Rights Act, so I don't even know how it stands up legally in that. I don't know which one's a bigger power legally, but they've used this report, which they have misled in the way that they framed it, and they have said, right, so we've got to remove that, and that feels dishonest to me. I think that there are lots of other things that could be done around safeguarding children that have nothing to do with taking away that presumption of contact. And I'm not going to get into the presumption of contact, as a legal guidance and the merits of that. But what I'm saying is the way that this has been just strategically manufactured is this report, then that from the government. It's built on a misleading document that is misrepresenting actually what its findings were to get that result. So, and that feels icky to me. That feels like something an abuser would do. They would strategically plan that to get that result. And like I said, I want to be very clear one final time. This for me is not about mothers and fathers. This is about children and behaviours. Domestic abuse, whether that be male to female, female to male, female to female, male to male, child to parent. These are sibling to sibling. These are, doesn't even talk about that. Doesn't even talk about sibling. But all of these victims deserve to have a voice. And the qualitative data side and the qualitative collection of data on this is massively undermining this report, in my opinion, because it doesn't do that. It doesn't talk to adult victims of their children abusing them. It doesn't talk to same-sex couples. It doesn't talk to fathers. It is only speaking to, and also I think the recruitment process itself was very heavily, it was all done through the Women's Aid avenue. So it was only women that was really shown any of this to be, so that they were the ones that responded. It feels strategic, and I don't like that, because that's what I work against with my clients all the time, is that shiftiness, and that's what this feels like. As I said, not saying I disagree in terms of the needs reform, 1,000,000%. A blind dog could tell you that. It needs reforming because it doesn't work for anyone, especially children. I don't feel that this is the right way, and I don't feel that what's been the knock-on effect of that is the right thing to happen either. And I know that might upset people, and I truly apologise. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. This is not about undermining anyone's experience. This is purely about the representation of facts and the way it's been gone about. Anyway, I can't really say any more than that. I think I've been quite clear in my stance. If I have offended, then I just have to take that on the chin. So thank you for watching. I'd love to know your thoughts. Drop them below. I am open. If I've missed something, if I've interpreted something wrong, let me know. I'm open to it. This is my opinion. Just my opinion. I'm wrong lots of times. So, don't be afraid to do that. But that's where I stand with it at the moment. So take care. Thank you very much. Bye.